everyone. Welcome to the NSLI virtual event, Citizen Ambassadorship. So today we have for Iron, Taiwan, and South Korea students, including myself, and we're going to present a little bit of our experiences on this topic, and then we are going to do a Q&A. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a black bar where it lists participants, Q&A, chat. This Q&A box, it is second from the left. That's where we're going to be taking questions. We're going to hold all questions until the end of the event, but then we'll be happy to answer as many as we can. And then the chat box, which is third from the right, that is where you may take any other comments or yeah. And so first I'm going to have each of the students give a little bit of a self-introduction. So starting with myself, my name is Olivia. I am 18 years old. I am from Tallahassee, Florida, and I am a student in Kaohsiung, Taiwan.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Hana Sharif. I'm 15 and I'm also a student in Kaohsiung studying at Wenzhou.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma. I'm 19 years old. I'm from a Chicago suburb and I'm currently studying in Seoul, South Korea.
Hey guys, my name is Josh Gilchrist. I'm 18 years old and I'm also studying in Seoul, South Korea.
Okay, great. So first we're going to kind of introduce the topic a little bit, and then each of us is going to present a little bit on our experiences. So next slide.
All right, so we decided that citizen ambassadorship fundamentally has two main aspects, those aspects being conscious and unconscious. So the conscious effort is basically anything that we make an effort to do consciously in our host countries to represent the U.S. And so this includes any active effort to educate those around us. This can include volunteer activities, activities in the host community or in the host school. And through these activities, we foster mutual understanding about our own country and about our host country through interpersonal relationships with people who live in our host countries.
And the second aspect of citizen ambassadorship, if you will, is unconscious citizen ambassadorship. I like to think that it differs from conscious citizen ambassadorship in the way that conscious uses active effort to facilitate some sort of exchange, while unconscious citizen ambassadorship involves actions that aren't specifically intended to promote understanding or facilitate exchange, but in the end, the byproduct or the result ends up naturally being one of these things. So for example, being a good guest in your host country, we do this because we're polite individuals and we want to show respect. But in turn, by being a good guest, we show America in a positive light and we're representing America well. And so that though we do take effort to be a good guest, unconsciously we aren't really intending to show off America in a positive light, but that just ends up being the result. Same thing with host family interactions and relationships. We become friends and become close with our host family and people in our local community because we want to live comfortably and have these relationships. But by being good friends with these people and by getting close, we're able to exchange and promote understanding. And by doing that, it just naturally becomes a result of these relationships that form.
Why is citizen ambassadorship important? It's important because it promotes understanding and dispels stereotypes of America and how we Americans view Taiwanese individuals. We are also representing our countries. So I'm a representative of America, giving my views and opinions of America and kind of educating the members of my community, my Taiwanese community, about America.
And I think that, of course, since this is a Department of State program, there is somewhat of a political dimension to us being here because um, as several of my classmates mentioned earlier, I think that the way that you act and the way that you portray yourself, whether that's through conscious discussions of American culture or through more unconscious traits, it's more likely to have an impact on people's impression of America because you're giving a very kind of human look at what otherwise just might be a very vague concept of America. Okay, great. So we can move on to the next slide. So first, then we're going to present a little bit. So I'm first up. So when I first came to Taiwan, I was really excited about being a cultural diplomat because I mean, it's such a cool way to kind of engage with the process of international relations. But at first I kind of struggled a little bit because I think I was kind of looked to as a representative for all of American culture. And I wasn't really sure at first how I could sort of best portray the culture that I came from. But ultimately, what I have learned is that being a cultural ambassador, it's pretty easy. It just means that you leave people with a better impression of America than they had before you met. And so I think that by virtue of being the only Americans in our host community, NSLI students like myself are really uniquely positioned to impact people's perspective of America. So obviously being in Taiwan, I'm confronted with a lot of really simple stereotypes about America. For example, people have asked me if I eat burgers every day for breakfast or if I partied a lot in high school because that's what they've seen on TV. But obviously these stereotypes are pretty harmless. It's pretty easily dispelled. But probably the biggest negative attitude and the most impactful negative attitude that I've sensed towards Americans is the idea that Americans just don't care very much about what makes Taiwan Taiwan, that we don't really have a lot of interest in Taiwanese culture or in learning Taiwanese languages or really getting to know Taiwanese people. I think that this stems partly from the political relationship since we don't officially recognize Taiwan as a nation, but I think it also stems from the fact that many people who come to Taiwan, many Americans, are business people or English teachers who can kind of get around without using Chinese or knowing a lot about Taiwanese food or culture. And so as a NSLI participant, it's obviously really easy to counter that because I'm literally here to learn Chinese and study Taiwanese culture. But there are still a lot of times when it affects my daily life. For example, even though the program is supposed to be immersion, a lot of times when I try to start a conversation in Chinese or even respond in Chinese, the person will continue to speak English with me because the assumption is that since I'm an American, since I'm visibly a Westerner, that I won't really know how to speak Chinese. And so an experience that really shaped my opinion on this topic occurred during my first week in Taiwan. I didn't really speak a lot of Chinese, and so I didn't really have the means to really discuss direct forms of diplomacy. I couldn't really share stories or say really direct things about American culture. And so I had met my host uncle, who I felt was kind of giving me the cold shoulder, like he wasn't quite welcoming me the same way that the rest of my host family was. And so we all sat down to dinner, and he gave me this food on the right here, and I ate it, and I was like, you know what? This is really, really good. I really like this a lot. So the food here is called pig's blood cake. It is a rice cake infused with pig's blood and deep fried in a Taiwanese night market setting. And so this is obviously a food that many Westerners who come to Taiwan are pretty afraid of. But I noticed that after I found out what it was and continued to eat it, my host uncle seemed to have a much better impression of me. He talked to me more directly. He helped me practice Chinese. He spoke to me in all Chinese, no English, which was really helpful for my language abilities. And overall, he just seemed to have a better attitude towards me. And the lesson that I took from this experience was that if you are really respectful and have a genuine interest in the culture you're trying to learn about, the response you're going to get is going to be that much better. And if you think about it, it really works in terms of interpersonal relationships, because why would you form a friendship with someone if you feel that they don't respect what makes you you? And so I think this can be applied on a political and a business scale as well. Because if you really show interest, even though it's something that seems really natural in our position, overall it has a really big impact. The next slide, please. Additionally, I think that, as Emma kind of hit on before, being a really upstanding citizen, a good guest, a good host student, I think that it really does help to lend a little bit more of a face to American culture. For example, I think that a lot of American students are stereotyped as being disrespectful, especially since the kind of position given to teachers in Taiwanese society is very different. And so obviously, you can counter that by being respectful in class. But another thing that I think many of myself and many of my classmates have kind of tried to express is being an active participant in class, which I think is one really strong characteristic of American students. And if that teacher had never met an American student before, they might even fear having an American student in their class. But after meeting more of us, I hope that just by acting the way that we should, I hope that the teachers and anyone else in that situation would have a better kind of ideal of American students. And so overall, I think that when you treat kind of an exchange experience with a really good attitude and just sort of the mindset of being the best person that you can be, ultimately, I think that when other people in your host culture think of Americans in the future, they will kind of think of you in a positive light, and that will reflect on America as a whole. Okay, so next we are going to move on to Hannah.
Hi, so for me, though I do engage in formal citizen ambassadorship, I have found that I often unconsciously practice citizen diplomacy. I find myself practicing this type of ambassadorship mostly through the process of making friends with Taiwanese kids at my university and around my neighborhood. Making friendships with locals is the easiest way to dispel stereotypes and prejudged thoughts about Americans, and also make studying abroad way more fun. I have found that the best way to do this is through pop culture. University and high school kids universally procrastinate through some sort of media, and whether it's TV shows, YouTube, or social media, once you find out what they like and what they're passionate about, you can begin to compare and contrast from the American version of that particular media. Next slide. For example, in Taiwan, a social discussion board called PPT is really popular with university students. There are a lot of different categories you can talk about, like Taiwanese politics or LGBT, all of which you can start discussions about with other people. One of my Taiwanese friends actually uses this site to talk about her favorite Taiwanese actors and discuss current events. So currently in Taiwan, local election season is still going on. So there have been quite a few discussion boards talking about the different candidates, and also the fact that the Chinese government might be interfering with Taiwanese local elections. This is similar to Americans' case of Russian interference with our own midterm presidential elections. So using my very limited vocabulary, I was able to talk about this with my same friends. Ended up talking about the different types of issues both Taiwan and America face, and how people are dealing with them versus the headlines you see in the media. Another friend and I were talking about YouTube, both very popular in our respective countries. But in Taiwan, one of the most popular YouTubers is a group of kids that go around and do different unconventional jobs in Taiwan. So one day they might be a farmer, the next a travel guide. And the reason why this YouTuber is so popular is in part because Taiwanese kids are kind of rebelling against this idea that they have to be a doctor, engineer, or office worker to be successful. A lot of kids think that going to vocational school or specializing in a field and finding a career opportunity that fits their passions is more important. And I told my Taiwanese friend that American colleges and high schools really emphasize finding what you love to do. And she was really surprised because she didn't know that American schools offer these types of opportunities for their students. Sometimes, though, pop culture can be harmful to how people view American society. I remember once I was studying with another friend at a coffee shop and we were talking about American TV shows. Then she looks at me very seriously, drops into this whispery voice and asks, "Is 13 Reasons Why really what happens in American high schools?" And if you don't know what 13 Reasons Why is, it's a controversial American teenage show that dramatizes and sometimes glorifies issues that high school students face, such as suicide, alcohol abuse, etc. And after watching the show and other forms of American media marketed to Taiwan, she was under the impression that all Americans partied and did things that were portrayed in American media. I had to explain that no, this is not what usually happens in American high schools. And the reverse situation happened to me recently when I was working on my midterm project, which is interviewing high school students. And through impressions I've gotten from American media, I assumed that most Taiwanese kids studied all the time, they didn't have any hobbies, and their parents were somewhat tiger mothers. And though Taiwan definitely places more of an emphasis on studying than Americans do, the kids I met and talked to all had really unique hobbies, from boxing to doing coffee art to DJing for friends. All these connections and exchanges of culture were made possible by the unconscious aspect of citizen diplomacy. Just by reaching out and creating friendships, I wittingly managed to create a dialogue between myself, representative of America, and the kids of Taiwan, the future. Unconscious diplomacy manages to leave a kind of natural impression upon those who you've made connections with, which I think is definitely important when changing people's opinions of the average American and what America is like based on their friendships with Americans like me. During my time in Taiwan, I hope to continue to sprout these types of conversations that lead to further understanding of both of our cultures and make as many new friends as possible. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to start us off for the other aspect of citizen ambassadorship, which is the conscious aspect. And so for me, citizen ambassadorship is essentially just the practice of being a good guest, as you would at an event or in a place that you were being hosted. I seek to know what is expected of me culturally and to fulfill those expectations. And so simply, for example, on public transportation, on the subway or on the bus, there are seats that are especially for disabled people, for the elderly, and for pregnant women. And so lots of people will sit in these seats if they're available, but I make an effort to not sit in them when I can. And so simple things like that, simply thinking about and making an effort to do what's expected of me is fundamental to being a citizen ambassador. Next slide, please. And so in addition to these simple things, I also try to make myself available as often as possible, simply to provide translation help. So one day while I was on the bus on my regular commute, I saw these two non-Koreans come onto the bus, and they were trying to pay. And when they were unable to pay, they didn't know quite how to. They asked the bus driver in English how to do so, and he responded to them in Korean. And it was clear that neither spoke the other's respective language. And so I went to the front of the bus and I helped them settle up and get paid using my Korean to talk to the bus driver. But after that, I thought was even more important, is that I got into an interesting conversation with these two guys who told me that they had come from Uzbekistan and they were working for a company here in Korea. And we had a good conversation about corporate life and life as a foreigner working in Korea. And so I learned a lot from that one just simple transaction, offering my help in translating. I learned a lot about Korean culture and about the place of foreigners here. And another place where I offer my translation help freely is at school. I'm actually fortunate enough to be placed in a Korean high school where lots of my classmates speak English fairly fluently, and that's a blessing and a curse at the same time. But one of the ways I help out is in English class. One of the teachers, every single class asks me, Josh, is this translation correct? Is this verb usage awkward? And I always help out in that way. And of course, whenever my classmates have an English paper or something, or they simply want to have a conversation in English, I'm always happy to provide that for them. And so using this specific aspect of translation help and simply trying to fulfill what's culturally expected of me, I attempt to be a citizen ambassador through my conscious efforts, and so that's manifested both in simple and more complex ways.
So, hi everyone. I partake in Conscious Citizen Ambassadorship through a mentorship program at my host high school. So, here in Seoul, us Nestle students attend a Korean high school 5 days a week, and I attend a private boarding school called Hana Academy Seoul. And here, 3 days a week, I partake in a mentorship program, usually with groups of 3 students. They're usually second-year students. And here, we're able to talk about anything that we want. We're given free reign to discuss a variety of topics. And in this environment, we are able to comfortably discuss in both English and Korean. So it's kind of a language exchange as well, whatever we want. And I think that through this mentorship program, I found a way to really act as a citizen ambassador by being able to exchange information and to promote understanding between our respective countries and cultures. So here I have pictures. On the right side, I have one of my mentorship groups, 3 male students who are second year. And on the left side, I have girls. We're at lunch, though, not partaking in our mentorship program. But here they're holding little goodie bags filled with candy corn. So I had my mother send me a package of candy corn about 2 weeks ago so that I could kind of share more of Halloween with the students, because Halloween really isn't a holiday um, that that Koreans celebrate. And so I realized that candy corn was a pretty unique thing to America, and many of the students at my school didn't even know what candy corn was. A lot of them that had seen it in movies didn't even think it was candy. Unfortunately, though, the girls here actually didn't like the candy corn. They thought the texture was weird and that it was too sweet, but it definitely was fun for them to try it out, and they got to brag to their other friends that they had this American candy that was so strange. The guys, on the other hand, probably because high school students, male high school students in particular, will eat anything, they really enjoyed it. At first, they pretended that it wasn't that good, but as we kept talking, I saw them continuously eating the candy corn out of the bag. And it was also like 9 in the morning during our mentorship class, so they were eating that sweet of candy that early in the morning. So I think that they approved our candy corn. Next slide, please. So in this mentorship class, like I said, it's just conversations between other classmates, and mostly we discuss similarities and differences between US and Korea, because we're both so curious about aspects of our cultures and our countries that we might not be able to get a lot of information about, especially sometimes through media, because that information can be inaccurate. This is a really great time for us to discuss those things. A lot of times we do have fun and silly conversations, but we also discuss some deep and heavy topics as well. I know before coming to Korea, I had this thought, mostly from articles I've read and just the media, how it portrays things. I had assumed that Koreans really had resentment or felt feelings of dislike towards Japanese people still, just because of the history the two countries share and about the Japanese occupation of Korea. And so coming into my mentorship program, I really wanted to see what they thought about it and to get their opinions on it, because it was something I've always wondered whether or not it was accurately portrayed in the media. And they were able to dispel this for me, and they let me know that honestly, when it comes to personal interactions with Japanese people, most Koreans don't feel any negative emotions towards them. They're friendly and polite, and overall they can communicate quite peacefully with each other. They did let me know that the older generation does sometimes have some resentment towards this, because they did go through that period, they lived through it, and so that subject is still quite heavy in their heart. But besides that, sometimes people do view the Japanese government in a sort of negative way because of how they believe they poorly handled the acknowledgement of the atrocities that occurred during that time. But by knowing this and being able to comfortably ask them these questions, we were able to exchange this information. And now I feel like I understand more about their country and their society and how they feel because of this history that really does still leave a trace in their society today. And for them too, they're able to ask me comfortably and feel okay asking me questions that they don't know where else they would ask. I know, like Hannah mentioned earlier, a lot of them are curious about gun usage and the whole school system in America. And so I got a few questions about school shootings and how safe it is in America. And that's a really heavy subject that they probably didn't know where else to turn to for that information. So in this mentorship program, we're able to comfortably talk about these subjects. And I think that that's why I really enjoy it. But even though we do discuss heavy topics like this, we do have fun as well. In my last slide with the group of boys, we often talk about food because honestly, that's what they only really want to talk about. I remember one day they were really disappointed in me because I've never had In-N-Out before. They were asking me all about the famous burger chains in America, and they were like, how could you not have had In-N-Out? So then this led me to explain that because America is so big, we have chain restaurants that are only found regionally. And so I'm like, I don't live in the West Coast, so I haven't had the chance. And so then this sprung about a topic of regional foods. And now they really want to try Southern food in particular. They think biscuits and gravy are such an amazing concept. And so just through these fun, silly conversations too, we're able to, exchange information about our cultures and learn more about each other's countries. And I think that by doing so, it's really interesting and entertaining, but also allows us to be more of a global citizen.
Okay, great. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we want to continue citizen ambassadorship after our program. So I think for Taiwan students like myself, it tends to be pretty easy because a lot of people, when I first told them I was going to go take a gap year in Taiwan, their second question after what's a gap year was normally, oh, you're going to Thailand? That's so cool. I've always wanted to go to Thailand. And I always have to be like, not really. Most people don't really know like much about Taiwan's history or culture or just anything about it really. And so I think that by answering the question, what were you doing for the last year? Or where is Taiwan? I think it's really easy to kind of expand those really simple questions into a larger discussion of Taiwanese culture.
Again, it's pretty much the same for me since no one knew what Taiwan was, where I was going. If they even spoke Chinese, they just thought Taiwanese people spoke Taiwanese. So basically just coming back to my high school and educating people about Taiwan and Taiwan's culture, and also educating people about the importance of being a global citizen and ambassador.
And so for me, when I return to the US, the way I'm going to continue being a citizen ambassador is hopefully working for a Korean business. I'm fortunate enough to live in a region of the US, the Washington, D.C. area, where there are a lot of Koreans. And so I hope to work for a Korean business, and in so doing, I connect the Koreans and the non-Koreans in my area.
When I return to America, I really want to continue to inform others about Korea. Even though I've been to Korea before on a Nestle summer program, I still got a lot of similar questions based off mostly in ignorance. And so I would really like to continue to inform others about Korea, mostly because of media and the West's idea of what should be focused on. Europe is mainly the choice of travel for many people and of information. So a lot of people don't know a lot about Korea or other Asian countries in particular. So I would love to continue to inform them about those type of countries and mostly about Korea. But also, I would love to encourage others to be citizen ambassadors. I found that a lot of people who have this passion for learning languages and learning about other cultures don't really know where to turn for being able to receive this opportunity. And so I would love to continue to promote Nestle as well as other study abroad programs that would give them the ability to do so. And by also encouraging others, whether they're studying abroad or not, whether they're traveling abroad for work or just for leisure, for fun traveling, that they keep in mind who they're representing when they're going abroad, and so that they'll be mindful of these things and try to represent America in the most positive light possible.
Okay, thank you, Emma. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of the presentation. If you have a question about cultural diplomacy or whatever other topic, you can leave it in the chat box or in the Q&A box as well. So the first question that I saw, and I'm scrolling up to it. The question was, when did you all actively start thinking about what it means to be a citizen ambassador? So I'll kind of just let everyone answer.
For me, it was honestly when I started applying for Nestle, because one of the first questions Nestle asks you in the application process is, how do you feel a citizen ambassador should act? How are you going to be a citizen ambassadorship for America if you're given this opportunity to go abroad? For me, that's when I really started thinking about how am I going to make a difference and an impact in my community if I, receive this opportunity. And that's when I started thinking about how am I going to consciously and unconsciously start being a citizen ambassador and being just a good representative of America and American culture.
Yeah, I kind of concur with Hannah. The essay process for State Department exchange programs definitely challenges you to think about what you have to offer about American culture. For me, I started thinking a lot about being from the wider South and from Florida, kind of what I could contribute in terms of regional culture. But as I mentioned, kind of when I was speaking before, I think it was something that hit me pretty immediately in Taiwan because um, I think by being there, you're just automatically looked to as a cultural ambassador. It's not necessarily a role you have to choose. It's kind of just one that gets thrown on you, although I obviously would have chosen it anyway. And so I think from that perspective, you kind of have to think about it immediately upon arrival.
I think for me, even though we did talk about citizen ambassadorship at our PDO, when I first participated in the summer program, I really didn't understand the concept. I felt that I wasn't exactly sure of what a citizen ambassador would be and like how I could partake in that role. But upon arriving in Korea and interacting with my local community at first, hearing them ask me so many questions that they had never had an outlet to ask before, I realized that I was really the first foreigner that they were really interacting with and could have conversations with. And so then after those interactions, I realized how important it was and how being a citizen ambassadorship and how being a citizen ambassador was basically you representing your country for people that may not have met other people before, and so that you are all they have. And I think from just those first conversations, that's when I realized how important it was, and it made me really think more about how I need to act from now on and how I should go about answering certain questions on certain topics.
Yeah, so my experience is actually pretty similar to Emma's. In hearing the term in my first PDO before summer program, I didn't really know what it meant. I thought I knew what it meant, but going into program, I didn't really. And I learned that when Koreans ask you like, "Oh, what's this like in America? What's that like in America?" It's hard to respond because things are so different from region to region, from family to family, et cetera, in America. And so, what I've found myself saying a lot, a phrase that I found myself saying is, "Well, every region is different, but this is how my family does it. This is how things are done in my city." And so, in that specific way, I've found it's important to be a kind of open citizen ambassador about the U.S. and about the West because things are not just one way here.
Okay, great. So the next question is pretty simple. Are you going to cook Southern food for your family, Emma?
Yeah, actually, after I talked with the boys about all the Southern food, they got really excited. And I'm actually part of my cooking club at my high school. And so I've been talking with the coordinating teacher for that club, and I'm really working hard to figure out a way for us to cook some food that's not Korean. And I think that that would be a really great time to, invite all our friends over and just like have a big meal of American food. And I'm definitely going to add biscuits and gravy to the list because they seem really excited about that.
I speak from experience. Southern food is really hard to find abroad, so good luck with that. Um, so the next question is, what is the hardest part about being a citizen ambassador?
I think for me, it's talking about kind of the controversial issues that Taiwanese kids and adults hear about in the media. So recently, I've gotten a lot of questions about gun violence in America since the recent shooting occurred. And it's kind of a hard thing to talk about, especially in another language, because there's so many sides to the argument, and it's hard to explain to a country that doesn't have any guns at all, what it's like to come from a country that, you know, is based a part of its constitution on gun laws. So I kind of have a hard time talking about those types of issues with Taiwanese people, but what I usually do is I kind of explain both sides the best way I can, and then kind of give them my opinion and, you know, kind of discuss it in that way, because I don't want to give them biased opinions based on my political views, because I want to give them kind of a full representation of what, you know, America's value and what some Americans don't value. So kind of dealing with those issues has been difficult.
I think that the hardest issue for me, Josh kind of hit on it earlier, but just kind of explaining regional cultures in the US is really hard. Specifically, when we go to a university in Taiwan, but a lot of my friends at the university are junior college students, which is a system where students from ages 16 to 20 end up taking like a high school curriculum and then essentially getting their AA when they graduate. I joined the Glee Club on campus, which is pretty much all junior college students. So, and a lot of people ask me things like, how many years of foreign language do American high school students take? Do American high school students have a lot of parties? What's the homework like? What's the school hours? What are universities like? How much do they cost? What kind of majors can you take? And of course, the answer is going to be different whether you go to a public school or a private school. I personally went to a magnet school, so my experience was really different from what a lot of kids had. It's going to be different depending on your state. For example, in Florida, you don't technically have to have a foreign language to graduate. And so just having to kind of explain, obviously controversial issues are also really difficult, but even just explaining the particulars of some things in America is really hard.
Yeah, I pretty much agree on the fact that talking about controversial topics can be kind of difficult, as well as trying to make answers as general as possible, but also being detailed enough so that they have their question answered. But so yeah, I agree, both of those are something that I find difficult as well.
All of the above. But also just being conscious of everything that I do and everything that I say all the time, because I'm representing a very large population of people who are different than me. And so it's just having that level of awareness and consciousness is not an easy thing to keep up.
Okay, great. So the next question is, what has surprised you the most, and what has been your biggest aha moment on the program?
Honestly, for me, it was when my host family first took me to a Taiwanese Costco. Everyone says that Taiwanese Costco's are no different from American Costco's, but that's false. They're very different. And for me in America, a lot of my time with my family, my own American family, was spent in Costco, you know, trying the samples and everything. So when I went to a Taiwanese Costco, I was kind of like taken aback, because there are a few key differences that kind of left me in shock. Taiwanese Costco's have not exactly an escalator, but kind of a flat escalator that you can just take your card on. It's just this huge hill that you just kind of roll up on. And once you get up there, there's all these huge neon advertisements of different Taiwanese brands. And I was just so stunned to see all these Taiwanese brands I've never heard of like pop up on there. I spent like a solid 2 minutes staring at it before my host finally told me we had to like, you know, go shop. But honestly, the products, they are similar to American products, but there was also some definitely Taiwanese products. So like the Taiwanese like culture, I guess, for chips in general, it's more different flavored chips. So they have seaweed chips, chicken flavored chips, honestly, just different types of flavors and tastes that you don't find in America. So kind of just looking at all those and, you know, realizing the differences between even such an American thing. It can be different in a totally different country.
So I have a few food stories I could tell, but I will refrain for the time being because we've heard a lot about food. Um, but one of the things surprising for me here is just power dynamics, especially in my high school. There's what's in Korean called sonbae hubei culture, and that's the relationship between seniors and people who are younger than them. So basically, anybody who's older than you, you have to address formally with your language. You have to bow to them in the hallways, and so I think this can be a negative thing, but it can also be a positive thing. And it is just very shocking to experience this firsthand, especially when I first got here, like seeing a ninth grader bow to a 10th grader, like a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old. Like really, is the 17-year-old really that much more experienced, that much more respectable? But it's just an interesting, but also shocking, at least initially, thing to observe.
Okay, great. So the next question is, do you have advice on the note of citizen diplomacy for upcoming NSLI or exchange students? That's that's a good question, but it's kind of difficult. I think I would probably say that the most important aspect of citizen diplomacy is just being yourself, but like the best version of yourself. So like I think for me it's been something that's been really easy to do while being abroad because I've been having a really great time. And so I think the most important thing about being a citizen diplomat is just sharing what is true to you and what is true to your life, but sharing it in a way that is consciously or unconsciously very accessible to people of other cultural backgrounds.
Adding to that, I would also say you have to try everything that you possibly can. You have to be open, and you have to be kind of willing to do things that might put you out of your comfort zone. So just, be yourself and go out there and try new things.
I think that being mindful of the culture of the country that you're in really can help you be a good citizen diplomat by allowing yourself to represent America in a positive light. Even if you think that other people are partaking in something and that would be contrary to the culture and like something that would be be respectful. But even if that's the case, still try your best to follow what you know of the culture and what they deem inappropriate or appropriate. Like for example, in Korea, there's the loud foreigner stereotype that all foreigners are really loud and obnoxious, and they're not considerate when it comes to being in public places, especially while riding public transportation. So even if you have an older lady next to you screaming on the phone, having a conversation, fighting with her husband, or you have like little middle schoolers who are screaming, playing a game, even if that's happening and technically that's not respectful, if you, a foreigner, partake in that same type of behavior, that will look bad on you and will represent America quite poorly. So I would say just be mindful of what their culture deems respectful, and just try to follow that and abide by those kind of cultural norms as best as you possibly can.
For me, I think just like Emma said, be mindful of what you're doing and be mindful of your surroundings, what's expected of you. But also don't be frustrated or angry if you do something wrong according to the culture and you're reprimanded for it. Like it's easy in that moment just to be angry initially, but take that moment and learn from it. And so this has happened to me several times, and like not using the correct level of formality or something like that. So just be aware of what you need to do, and if you fail to do that, it's okay. Just learn from it.
Yeah, because if you learn from it, then you're showing them that Americans learn from their mistakes and that we try to make ourselves better, and that's good to show.
Okay. We're a little bit long on questions, so if you have any questions, I would really encourage you to send those in the chat box or the Q&A box. But in the meantime, I have a question. Is there a time when you felt that you either miss that the impression you gave of America maybe what it wasn't what you wanted it to be, or that I guess just a very clash of cultures moment, like something where you just felt like American culture was so different and you just didn't really understand?
Honestly, for me, since I'm also Asian, different type of Asian Indian, but our cultures are pretty similar in some aspects, like, parenting techniques, kind of the way we address elders and, kids. Those were similarities, but one thing I wasn't really sure about, um, well, it was kind of more of people approaching you on the streets and asking you questions and asking you things. Um, at first, when you first come, you're like, oh, wow, people are talking to me. And, it's great to have conversations in Chinese with total strangers. But sometimes there are strangers that ask you, oh, can you be my language partner? Or can you help me with this English and that? And you have to say no, or you just have to say no because they're asking you to do something. Well, you're supposed to be doing something for a total stranger that you don't really know, and maybe you're busy or maybe you can't do it, so you have to say no. And I feel bad about that because I'm giving this impression that, I don't know, Americans are too busy, or she's cold or something like that. That's kind of something that I've found difficult to juggle with, because you'll have like nice people that come up to you, but you'll also sometimes have people that aren't exactly nice or rude or want something from you come up to you and ask you questions.
For me, I sometimes feel that there at my host high school, that if I don't try my best, I might be giving a negative impression of American high school students to my teachers. Right now, I'm taking AP Statistics at my high school, and I took it in America, and it was great. But in Korea, it's taught in Korean. The notation is different. It's just very difficult. And in this class, my teacher has students code for their homework. And so he expected me to do it, and I couldn't even download the program on my computer. So he gave me his computer to take home so I could do my coding assignments. And let's just say I've never coded before, and it was very difficult for me. And so there was a 3-week period where I was spending hours doing coding homework and staying up late trying to finish these things because I wanted him to think of me as a good student and that I was trying really hard so he would think positively about American students. But eventually I went up to him actually this week and I talked to him personally, just telling him directly that I have to focus on Korean studies and that I'm having a lot of stressful moments and it's quite overwhelming having to deal with this. And just by talking with him, I think he understood me. He knew where I was coming from, and even though at first I was really worried he'd be disappointed and he would think badly of me, I realized just by communicating with him, he understood me. And so I think that even because I talked with him and I didn't let it continue on and on, I think that itself was a positive impression.
I know I've had some moments where I'm not proud of how I've represented American culture, but they're not exactly coming to mind right now. But just in general, when I've made a generalization, or when I haven't specified that, like, this is how my high school in the U.S. did it, this is how things are in my region, but then I realize like a minute later, oh, I didn't actually say things are very different in other places. That's happened several times, but just as a general issue.
The reason that I thought about this question was what Emma was saying about traffic, because that was one time I remember our entire NSLI group was like riding on a bus together, and the driver was just like, shh, like he kind of got upset with us. And so that was kind of one time where I was just kind of not really happy with that. But something that I've been confronted with recently that I think kind of stems from a culture class is kind of how I've represented myself in the student culture. Um, so at Wenzhou, every day we take 3 hours of Chinese classes, and then we have electives that we take in the university. And but this week is our midterm week, and I've learned that I think like many of the midterms are presentations, and I've learned that the culture here, it seems to be a lot less strenuous than American presentation culture. And I suppose it's kind of the opposite of what Emma was saying, but sometimes I feel like I'm working a little bit too hard and people think I'm a nerd. Because I'm in this big like art class with like 60 students, and it's an art history class. And so for the presentation, it was 10 people for a 15-minute presentation. So only half the group presented, which is pretty rare in an American project. And then on top of that, the people who weren't presenting basically wrote everything that everyone else is going to say. And in my heart, I was like, I cannot do this. That is academic dishonesty. And so up to the day, I was constantly texting my friends in the class. I'm like, is this okay? Am I doing the right thing? And I think they were just really like confused because they didn't really think of it as like a problem. And so I think by letting my midterm anxiety kind of permeate, I think that I wish I had acted a little bit more chill in the situation. And I think that if I had represented myself and by kind of default my culture and a little bit better of design, because I know that I'm the only foreigner in the entire class. So obviously my kind of attitude towards what I was doing was being looked at as kind of different than how other people were being looked at. So I think this is going to be our last question because we're kind of hitting the 11 o'clock mark here. The last question is, any plans to share about Thanksgiving with your host communities? I know that both of our NSLI groups have Thanksgiving activities planned. In Taiwan, we were actually invited to, I apologize, I don't know his formal title, but essentially the leader of the American Institute in Taiwan, which is the equivalent of a consulate or embassy in Kaohsiung. And so he invited us over to a public place so that we and other Americans in Kaohsiung can celebrate Thanksgiving together. But as for myself, other than that, I'm trying really hard, but people just aren't very interested, to be honest. I keep being like, yeah, we go and eat food together and we watch football together and do all these things, but there's just not really an equivalent to it in Taiwan. And especially because Taiwan's sort of always kind of jumps straight from Halloween to Christmas. And so I kind of have to be like, wait, slow down, there's Thanksgiving. So it's a struggle, but I'm trying to share just in conversation about it as much as I can.
For me, honestly, I don't really celebrate Thanksgiving in my own home in America. We'll do a pie, but that's kind of it. But I've been actually just trying to talk to my host family about it and kind of getting into it more. I've just been kind of in a Thanksgiving mood, I guess, but I think we're going to go out to dinner at an American restaurant. I'm trying to push for that, but we'll see.
So apart from the official event that we're going to do, the NSLIans in Korea, like bringing some of our high school friends actually and sharing a Thanksgiving meal with them and doing some speeches on Thanksgiving. One specific thing I've done is I've explained the concept of a turducken to my host mom. We had great fun talking about that.
But yeah, as Josh was saying, tomorrow actually we're having a Thanksgiving event where we're gonna sit down, eat some turkey and all those other Thanksgiving foods with high school friends from our host high schools as well as embassy officials and just talk about anything really. And we are presenting, each of our Korean classes are presenting a topic from food to history of Thanksgiving. So that'll be really fun.
And sorry, we actually have one more quick question. What do we miss the most? Aside from family, friends, and all that kind of good stuff, I definitely miss food the most. I mean, I love Taiwanese food. It's great. I eat it every day. But I would really kill for some Chick-fil-A right now.
I really miss making food. Making food is definitely something I'm missing. I'm missing my kitchen and just being able to, go downstairs 11 o'clock at night and make myself a bowl of cereal. Now I just kind of stay at my room. I usually buy something from 7 to last me through the week if I'm, getting hungry in the night. But yesterday, actually, I ran out my rations, so I decided to eat a bunch of probiotic Taiwanese, not really medicine, but it just helps your stomach feel better. I just ate 5 of those and went to bed. So yeah, I just miss making food.
I think that one of the things I miss most isn't really a material thing, but it's just being able to be confident that you'll be understand at pretty much any moment of the day. There are times like when I'm talking with people that I can tell that they're trying really hard to understand what I'm saying, but me stumbling through Korean isn't really quite getting the point across. And sometimes I wish I could just like breathe and just like say whatever I wanted to say and it would just come out perfectly. And so sometimes I struggle with not being able to be understood by everyone. So I do miss speaking in English or being able to communicate fully with someone my ideas. But then again, it's also very rewarding when I do that in Korean where I can have an entire conversation, everything comes out naturally, or I realize that I use a grammar point that I struggled with, anything like that. When I do succeed in that, it does feel really good. So even though I miss being able to be understood 24/7, I guess the positive side of that is because I do feel that way. When I am understood, it's 10 times better and more of a rewarding experience.
Yeah, so first of all, for me, of course, it's my friends and my family. Just being able to spend time with them, have conversation with them because they can identify with who I am and my motivations and etc. But exact same as Emma said, just being able to express myself clearly. They're just as I dive deeper into the Korean language and discover how little I actually know of it, I'm also discovering how detail how much in detail we speak in English, how much nuance and tone and intonation we depend on to convey meaning, and all of that is different in a different language. And so on top of missing family and friends, it's definitely being able to express myself.
Okay, great. So I think that is going to conclude our citizen diplomacy webinar. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you learned something about citizen diplomacy. And it's pretty late in our respective countries, so I think we are going to sign off. Thank you so much for coming. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.